it can often be hard, I think, when you're in the heat of the moment to like get out of your own head. And one of my go-tos is something that we call distanced self-talk. And what it involves doing is using language to relatively effortlessly shift our perspective.
Welcome to the Dealing with Feelings webcast. Today, I spoke with Dr. Ethan Kross, professor at the University of Michigan and author of a fantastic book called Chatter. We spoke about the science and practice of distancing. I really loved how we got both scientific and practical on how we can apply these strategies in our everyday lives. Hope you enjoy.
Hey, Mark, it's great to see you again, and it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate it. So let's just get started by, I'm going to ask you a question that I ask everybody, which is, how have you been feeling?
I'm feeling, I would say, high arousal, positivity, any kind of anxiety, agitation is diminished. I have a lot of hope. I'm filled with excitement. I'm energetic, as you can probably tell right now. And so, and there's a distinct absence of any sadness or anger or envy.
All right, so let's jump in. As you know, this series is about healthy emotion regulation. And I think it's important for us to just off the bat, how do you think about emotion regulation? So if I were to say like, hey, Ethan, at a coffee shop, like, wow, you study emotion regulation, what the heck is that? How would you respond?
I would respond that emotions are tools that we have evolved to help us navigate the world. And I want to be clear that all emotions are tools, not just the positive ones, but the bad ones too. So just a few minutes ago, you mentioned that you're feeling a little bit of anxiety in this situation. When I register that, I think to myself, Mark's going to nail it on this webcast. So why do I say that? Because we know that anxiety can be, in the right dosage, can be really, really useful for getting people to zoom in on the thing they care about, to prepare. I often tell a story about how the one time I really flubbed a big talk, it was a talk that I flew in, I showed up, and I just didn't feel any kinds of butterflies in my stomach. It was a talk I had given dozens of times before, and I just couldn't get a little bit agitated. And I think I was flatter than usual in that presentation, right? I didn't have that kind of negative emotion to really energize me to the point where I really kind of met the audience and nailed the delivery. So, back to what is good emotion regulation. Emotion regulation is emotions help us achieve different kinds of goals. Of not just the positive, also the negative. Anger can be really useful for helping us correct a perceived transgression. If you feel like you've been wronged and there's still the opportunity to intervene, anger is what drives you to do that. So the problem with emotions, though, they can be useful in lots of situations, is we often experience them either too intensely or too long, or both of those circumstances can combine, too intensely and for too long. And those are the two indicators for me that our emotions are ceasing to be useful and they are now becoming harmful. And that's when you want to get in there and try to manage those emotions to either reduce their volume or the amount of time you spend sitting in them, so that you can free yourself up to be the sentient being that you are, to have these emotions work for you rather than against you. And what I just find super fascinating are all the different tools that we have evolved to possess to help us deal with that fundamental challenge. And I really do think that our ability to manage our emotions effectively is one of the big challenges we face as a species.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I know, I'm 54 and have been, studying this stuff and practicing it and teaching it and writing about it for, almost 30 years now, and I still struggle oftentimes. And people, say to me things like, but Mark, you wrote about this stuff. I'm like, yeah, but like, who knew there was going to be a pandemic? Like, I didn't have practice regulating in that situation.
That's right. And like there are many situations where I think we just get better at regulating our emotions over time because we experience the scenario, we do a post-mortem to figure out what worked, what didn't, and then we adapt moving forward. But as you're saying, life is really good at throwing us curveballs that we haven't faced. And the good news there is that if you've got a reservoir of skills to fall back on, right, it doesn't mean you're going to hit a home run when every time you get a new curveball, but you are going to have some tools to fall back on. But I think when I talk to folks and they describe, I'll ask, have you ever had difficulty managing your emotions? And people sometimes feel really, really bad about that. And I say, welcome to the human condition. I've described this as these are Adam and Eve problems. Like if you think back, like we've been struggling with our emotions for as long as we've been roaming the planet. And that's okay because we've also learned about what we could do about that.
I'm curious because everybody has a story, and we're going to go deeper maybe into other aspects of your life in a moment. Wow. But just take a deep breath. Yeah. I'm going to give you a prevention strategy. But, at what point in your life, people ask me all the time, like, why are you studying emotional intelligence? And so I'm really curious, when did you have this aha, like, I'm going to dedicate my career to studying, emotion regulation?
So the aha for me came in college when I took my first psychology class. To explain why that was an aha, though, I need to back up and start when I was 3 years old. And I promise you, I won't give you a year by year.
Okay.
How this evolved. It'll be quick. But I've told this story before. I was raised in a household with a dad who, looking back as a dad now myself, was a pretty unconventional paternal influence. On the one hand, my dad was what I think of as the kind of classic rough Brooklynite. Brooklyn, big bushy mustache, loved watching the Yankees, had incredible dexterity when it came to using his middle digit while driving on the road. If you know what I mean, and you're in the Northeast, you get it. Midwest, that doesn't happen as much. And so it's very kind of just like in your face. But then, he never graduated from college. He was a salesman, different job every couple of years kind of thing. But he had this real passion for Eastern philosophy. And so, he would read Hindu and, Vedic texts and Buddhism. And he would tell me, starting around the time I was 3 years old, he would talk to me about what he learned. You and I might share our latest insights with our graduate students and colleagues. Like, here's 3-year-old Ethan, learning about the Bhagavad Gita. And it was insufferable growing up, like hearing him talk to me about these things. But he would talk to me often about emotion regulation. One of the first lessons, he would drill down, like every time if you have a problem, you get into a fight with mommy or daddy, or someone's bugging you at school, go inside, right? Try to figure out the solution, find the kernel of truth. He talked in these dramatic terms, and then go with it. Like, tap into your intuition. And so, fast forward, I did my best to not listen to him growing up. Like, I run away from the bedroom when he talked to me about this stuff. But as most parents, any parents who are listening will likely identify, there's a way in which what you tell your kids, even if they pretend not to listen, implants itself in their mind. And kids do come back to that information as they develop. And I did. And so I'd get into arguments or fights or experience rejections. And I was always really good at managing my emotions, like throughout high school and college. Like I would use introspection to my benefit. Then we get to the first psych class, and halfway through we get to the topic of introspection. And I'm thinking I don't even have to read the chapter on this stuff, right? I've been living it for 17 years. And first thing I learned, introspection is a superpower. It is the reason why we are capable of doing remarkable things as a species, right? Introspection is what allows us to solve problems, to be creative, to innovate, all these wonderful things. But, fast forward a few minutes in the lecture, it is also one of the biggest challenges that we struggle with. It is the cause of various kinds of anxiety and sadness and rage. And so the light bulb just, the switch went on, and wow, we've got this amazing tool, this ability to use our mind and word, make sense of our circumstances, find meaning, develop purpose. But it jams up on us consistently in ways that cause really big problems. And so that to me was just fascinating. And I became motivated to spend my spare time studying. I'll tell you one more thing really quick. It's kind of funny aside. The way I really knew that this was the career path for me was I had this class, found this really interesting, but then I found myself in my spare time thinking about this stuff. And I had this one moment where I went to school in Philadelphia at Penn, and it's a Saturday night. It's like 11:30, and my friends and I are walking to a party on campus. And I turned to one of my friends, like, have you ever thought about this introspection paradox and why this happens? And he just pauses and he looks at me, goes, Kross, you call me by my last name. What is wrong with you? Why are you thinking about this on a Saturday night? And that was the bug. That was that curiosity that just fomented. And I continue to have it to this day.
Yeah. That's, it's interesting, so much of our development influences us. And, my story is kind of the complete opposite of yours, which is that I grew up with two parents who I knew loved me, but were terrible at regulating. My father just had a lot of anger. He wasn't from Brooklyn. He was from the Bronx. And not sure that's the reason.
We all like the Yankees. It's all good.
Yeah, exactly. And my mom also was from New York, and she had just terrible anxiety, and her go-to strategies, were doers, her little secret doers cup of, watching Johnny Carson
mm-hmm.
and a little bit of, talking about negative self-talk. I grew up with a mom who was constantly saying things like, I'm going to have a breakdown. I'm going to have a breakdown. And, that influences, as you call, I'm going to plug your book now, Chatter. And I'd love for you to, talk us through, and all the research you've done, which I've read and appreciate, of all the strategies that you've researched, which one first have you studied the most? And secondly, why that strategy? What makes that strategy so helpful?
So let me give a disclaimer to anyone here who is watching and listening. I will say from the outset, I believe very strongly that there are no magic bullets when it comes to managing our emotions. And I think we often talk about emotion regulation in terms of finding magic bullets. One strategy that works for all people in all situations doesn't exist. It doesn't fit what we know about how the mind works. And I think the quicker we can move away from that way of thinking, the more progress we will make in this sphere. What we scientists often do, though, is we drill down into specific strategies because we want to understand them in all their intricacies. And I've certainly done that in my career. I've studied lots of different tools, but the category or family of tools that I've spent the most time looking at are what I call distancing or self-distancing strategies. And the idea here is it really centers on this notion that we're often much better at advising other people on their problems than we are giving advice and taking it ourselves. We've actually given a name to this phenomenon. A former student, now colleague, Igor Grossman, and I published a paper called Solomon's Paradox. It's named after the Bible's King Solomon, who is probably the wisest individual in history. I think if you hear wisdom, like King Solomon comes up. But if you dig into his personal history, what you learn, he's really good at weighing in on other people's dilemmas. But when it came to his own life, he made a slew of terrible decisions, decisions that would be classified as unwise. And so I think we should all find this to be a liberating finding, right? Because I think so many people that I've met with and chatted with over the years, they feel, well, let me back up. When I pose this paradox to audiences and I ask, have you ever been in this situation? You could dish it out to others, but when it comes to yourself, you can't follow the advice. Every hand in the audience goes up. You know, as a person who does a lot of public speaking, it is hard to get every single hand in an audience to come up. But this is a phenomenon that really is a kind of very relatable experience. And I think we often beat ourselves up about this, but it should be liberating to know that at some level, we all have this tendency to be hypocritical in some ways. It's part of how we are predisposed. But, and this will get us back to distancing, the good news is that there are lots of tools that exist that allow us to temporarily shift our perspectives and to get us to weigh in on our problems like we're thinking about someone else's. And when we do that, we get some distance from our own space, and that frees us up to be just a little bit more objective about what we're going through, which is often the difference we need to navigate that situation more effectively.
Before you jump into the real granularity of that, I am really curious about like why that, like, because as kids, right? I think I can. And you're saying that that might not be the best approach.
We'll go a little bit more granular now. Being what I would call immersed in the first person, this works for us 98% of the time. And that's another important thing, I think, for people who are tuning in to recognize, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, that should be just one mantra of emotion regulation. If the way you are navigating your life is serving you well emotionally, don't intervene. So thinking in the first person about how we're doing and motivating ourselves, this works a lot of the time. This is also useful for amplifying experiences, both positive and negative. For example, if I've just like had a major victory, what would a major victory for me be? I don't know. I teach a class or I do a workshop where it just really, it's magic. And sometimes you teach it always works out well, but there's variability, same content. And sometimes it's just everyone's buzzing, right? And other times it's great, but it's not buzz. We want the buzz. We want the magic. And like in that situation, I want to fully immerse myself in that experience. I want to be totally present in the first person. I'm feeling great, right? Like that was just
like savoring. You want to savor it. You want to
savoring, immersing. When I'm like at the soccer field with my daughters and, coaching with passion from the sidelines, not annoyingly, but like, shoot the ball, like I want to just savor those experiences. When we do that for negativity, though, that can amplify the negative experience as well. So there's an asymmetry. There's being immersed and in the first person when we are processing an emotional experience amplifies positive and negative emotions. Getting some space, distancing yourself from it, can turn the volume down on both positive and negative emotions. So I would never tell people to try to get distance from all their emotional experiences. We want to be really strategic in when we use this tool. So to make this all a little bit more concrete for folks, because we know there are many different kinds of distancing tools, one of my go-tos is something that we call distanced self-talk. And what it involves doing is using language to relatively effortlessly shift our perspective. So it can often be hard, I think, when you're in the heat of the moment to like get out of your own head and try to adopt a more objective perspective. All right, but how do I do it? And what we and others have discovered is that using your name or the second person pronoun you to silently reflect on what you're going through and to coach yourself through a circumstance can be a really, really powerful tool for shifting perspective. So if I'm really struggling with something, I might say, Ethan, how are you going to manage a situation? What are you doing right now? The reason we find that linguistic shift, which on the surface sounds a little hokey, I get it. Uh, but the reason why many people do this spontaneously when they're experiencing stress, and we've got a full, well, maybe file drawer is the wrong reference here, but we've got lots of examples like clippings from the newspaper. Julius Caesar did this, Jennifer Lawrence, LeBron James, all these examples, anecdotes of when people are under stress, they slip into using their name to coach themselves through a situation. Like, why do we do that? Well, if you think about it, when do we use words like you or names? We typically use those parts of speech when we think about and refer to other people. Most of the time we think about ourselves, it's I, me, my, right? Ethan, somewhere out there in the world, usually. You is the verbal equivalent of pointing a finger at someone else. And so the links between those parts of speech and thinking about others is super strong. And so what that all boils down to is when you use the word you or your name to try to coach yourself through a situation, it's like effectively flipping a little switch that's pushing you into this kind of advisory mode. It's like you're giving advice to another friend, and that makes it a whole lot easier to reason objectively and wisely about our circumstances.
I have to tell you, a relevant personal story about that. So I have a niece who is just near, very, very close. I'm very close with. And a couple of years ago, I knew about that technique, and she was struggling in school. She wanted to be in the school play, but was very kind of afraid of being made fun of and lots of different stuff. And so we worked on strategies. And long story short is that the day of the play, I went, and she did a fantastic job. And I said, Esme, what was your strategy when you got nervous before you went on stage? She said, Uncle Mark, I took a deep breath and I looked in the air and I said, Esme, face your fears.
I love it. I love it.
And, it's amazing how that has, she's now in college and doing really well. But just the idea of just pausing, like you're saying, and having that outward kind of, look at yourself, that advice giving. And it just gave her that ability to just say, go for it. And so
it activates a different script. And your example resonates really strongly with me because in some ways I feel like I've morphed into my dad I try not to be obnoxious with my kids about sharing what we study in the lab, but struggling, I talk to them about this stuff. And like I did with my dad, they tend to, roll their eyes and change the topic. But a couple of years ago, my oldest daughter took up diving. And diving is a really interesting case study of a sport for emotion regulation because you spend a lot of time diving just alone with your thoughts, waiting to get up there on the board. Like, sometimes it can be even hours, and you get up there on the board and everyone's looking at you. You've got this one shot to nail it. And my daughter's been like so poised, and I like, Maya, what do you do? Like when you're waiting, like right before you get up there, and it eerily similar to your niece. She goes, I take 3 breaths, I pound my hand in my fist, and I say, Maya, you got this. And then I do it. And it was that simple. So there's actually a blending there of a ritual, which is another tool. We haven't studied it directly in our lab, but I often talk about it because I think it's another powerful tool that we have in our emotion regulation armamentarium, if we want to use that phrase, that often gets a bad rap in popular culture. I think people often think about rituals and equate them with clinical disorder. Conditions like OCD and other anxiety, but there's been a lot of research on rituals, and they've proven to be a useful regulatory tool. They're an ancient tool, in fact, that our cultures have given us for dealing with uncertain, anxiety-provoking times for thousands of years. I mean, cultures around the world, when someone that you love dies, their culture gives them a set of practices to engage in during that time. And the practices that you're given, these grieving rituals, is just one example. It's not really clear how they should help you manage the intense distress associated with losing someone that you very much love. But research shows that they can be effective. And so what a ritual does, one of the ways it helps us is a ritual, whether it be cutting your hair and dressing a certain way or taking 3 breaths and pounding your fist a few times into your palm, it's under your control. When we are experiencing intense negative emotions like anger or thought looping like chatter and rumination, it feels as though we're not in the driver's seat anymore. Our thoughts are taken over. Like we're not in control. And that's something that is deeply unsettling because we all crave control, right? This is a truism of human beings. And so a ritual, performing something that's under your control, that compensates for the lack of control we feel inside. And that's in part why performing those rituals can be effective. That's part of the reason why cleaning and organizing when you are stressed out actually makes people feel better. Do you ever do that when you're
Oh, well, my new thing is I have a great new thing for when I'm writing again a lot. And, either I blame my significant other for all of my incompetencies,
this is a short-term tool that can have long-term
yeah, exactly. Or what I do is now I work out and I just go to the gym and it's been amazing. I'm I may not get the writing done, but at least I'm going to be in better shape.
That is very, very effective way of managing.
Yeah.
No question about it.
A couple of things that are coming to mind based on what you've just said. One is I also I did a lot of reading and a lot of studying, in Eastern philosophy and Buddhism. And in Ruler, which is our model that's in schools, one way as a scientist who's visiting the school, as opposed to the scientist who's asking people to do the surveys and the randomized trials, is I just go up to a student or a teacher and I just say, when you're really in that deep red on the mood meter, what's your automatic go-to strategy for dealing with that feeling? And I feel like that ability to have in your pocket a go-to strategy is so important. And I'll just give you an example. So I have a couple of them and it depends on the feeling. But one of the ones that I rely on all the time, which is, rooted in your research, is if I'm at an airport, let's say, and I'm just freaking out because the flight's getting delayed and I just want to get home. I just take a seat, I take a few deep breaths and I'm like, Mark, this feeling is impermanent. And it's just talking to myself, you're 54, you've had this frustration of 357,000 times before. You're going to wake up tomorrow morning and have a good cup of coffee and it's going to be fine. And so just reminding myself that the irritation, frustration, annoyance, whatever it is I'm feeling is temporary is just enormously helpful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what's interesting there, so first of all, if you ask me what my default is, there are 2 strategies that I implement simultaneously, usually, and they're both distancing strategies, and they're essentially what you just described doing. So I will immediately switch into distant self-talk mode. Ethan, that's the way we're talking for a little bit, and we should give people the caveat that we're talking about doing this silently under most circumstances, not walking through JFK yourself with your name out loud, right? There's some issues with that. AirPods make it a little bit easier to do that if you're so inclined, but we're talking about silent self-talk. So first tool is Ethan mode. But then the second thing I will do is what we call temporal distancing or mental time travel. I will remind myself, I'll ask myself, Ethan, how are you going to feel about this tomorrow or next week or next year? What's so fascinating about these big emotions that we experience is that when they trigger, we zoom in on their awfulness. When you're in the airport and you get put in the worst seat on the plane and the bathroom is backed up, whatever else is your air travel conundrum. you're thinking about all of these sources of discomfort, which, just drives the emotional response and makes it feel like it's never going to end. When you ask yourself, how are you going to feel about this tomorrow morning? What that does is it immediate, it's like anti-venom. It counteracts the fact that you're not looking at that bigger picture. It broadens your perspective and it makes you, oh, yeah, you know what? This is really bad, but I'll feel better about this tomorrow. I had stomach poison. I'm going to give you something that now that I know about some of your travel concerns, this like trigger warning, I'm giving it to you right here. A couple of months ago, I was coming back from a visit down south with family. And, I just I picked the wrong straw because five of us had the roadside barbecue in South Carolina, and I was the one who it did not sit well. And when I talk about it not sitting well, we will spare folks the gory details, but suffice it to say, um, I was in the airport in Atlanta, going from one restroom to the next, and it felt like the world was ending. During that moment, when I legitimately said to my wife, I'm not getting on the plane. Like, there's no way it's going to happen. What helped me get through this was thinking, well, you've experienced stomach poisoning before. You have recovered, right? Like, so how are you going to feel about this next week? And that took the edge off. So it works for even those kinds of extreme situations. Yeah.
I'm going to jump to something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. I think I might be a little bit older than you are, but we've both been around for a while doing research, getting our ideas out there. As someone who's kind of immersed in the field of emotional intelligence, which is kind of maybe you call it a grand theory, because it's lots of skills that come together to make us what we call emotionally intelligent. There's that field of positive psychology, just the field of emotion regulation. This has been around now, like in a solid way for about 30 years, like really solid, people like measuring it, studying it, et cetera, doing randomized trials of it. And, I'm sitting back now, our approach of teaching this is in 5,000 schools, around the globe. And I look at the data, on people's mental health. I look at the data on loneliness and isolation, and I get sad because I feel like the promise of the work, that we all spend so much time doing, is being broken. And I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts about that? Like, why do you think, there's like more studies on emotion regulation than there are people who need to regulate, but yet it looks like people are not learning and applying these skills to better their lives. And I'm stuck with that like conundrum.
So much to say on this, Mark. We may have to have a part two. So I am completely aware of the same data and circumstances. Although, my read of it is, it feels this may be like an implicit way of drawing an inference about my personality here, but I find it fills me with hope because I see the circumstance and I think there are so many ways that we can use science to improve the situation. Why are rates going up or staying the same, but by many measures going up, despite all of this innovation? Well, I think one problem is we have not, although we've made a lot of progress in emotion regulation research, we still have a lot to learn, and we haven't really studied emotion regulation in the way it plays out in daily life. Uh, as just one example of that, it goes back to a topic we touched on a little bit earlier. We spend so much time studying how individual strategies work, individual tools under tightly controlled conditions. We profile their mechanisms of action. We look at their neural correlates. We look at their short and long-term effects in controlled laboratory studies. But when you look at what people do in their daily lives, they're not only doing one thing. They're often doing several things. So we did, there's this data we're really excited about. It's not yet published. We're revising it. During COVID, we did these two really large studies of emotion regulation. during the first 2 peaks of COVID, we did these diary studies. So every day for 2 weeks, we asked people to rate their anxiety, and we gave them, I think it was 18 different tools to choose from. What did you do to manage your anxiety? And we, 2 samples, nationally representative, all the bells and whistles you want for good, solid research. And when we crunched the numbers, it was really surprising. So, what was surprising? Surprise number one, very few people used a single tool to manage their COVID anxiety on any given day. On average, it was like 3 to 5 strategies at a clip. Number two, there were no one size fits all solutions. So, different people benefited, in some cases, enormously from using different cocktails of tools. So, in other words, the 3 things that worked for me might be very different from the 4 things that work from you. In many cases, there was zero overlap, and no theoretical framework that is out there was capable of predicting what people would do across time. So there's variability characterizing you versus me. There's even variability across time for a single individual. So it wasn't the case that if 3 things, ABC worked for me, that I did that every day. I might go ABC, BXQ, QGR. I'm getting confused with the letters now, but so much beautiful complexity characterize people's emotion regulatory lives. And so when I look at that data, I think we've got a lot to learn. On the one hand, we know that these tools can be very, very useful, but I think we got to think differently about how we teach people to use these tools. I be encouraging self-experimentation, which sounds not so nice, but what I'm talking about here are day one. All right, if this happens, try these 2 things. If one of them works, keep doing it. Layer on another. You have to find the profiles that characterize you as a unique, sentient organism, a living, breathing, feeling person, right? And I don't think we've done a great job of doing that, but I am enormously encouraged because there is a groundswell of interest in going in that direction right now.
This is very inspiring for me just because that's the way I think about it always. And I think part of the problem that I see in the implementation pieces is that everybody's looking for the right strategy, right? The quick fix. So like at my university, it was like breathing exercises and everybody just breathed. And I'm like, I don't know, like if you're sitting in class feeling envious, of your peers, you're not going to be able to breathe that away. Or it's yoga, or it's
meditation, the buzzword of the past, I don't know, 20 years. I love meditation. My dad was teaching me the lotus position. I got a mantra, transcendental meditation mantra. I was 5 years old, right? I know how to do it. It's wonderful, unique. It's got benefits, science driven, but it doesn't work for everyone, right? And it's also really effortful. So there's a time and a place for it. So we need to start embracing the complexity of people's emotion regulatory lives rather than trying to reduce it to this one thing.
And it's also emotions, think about it. I don't know, your personality well enough to make any kind of thoughts about this, but, people, because I do a lot of speaking and oh my God, Mark, he likes to go out and he likes to have dinner and he likes to go to, a sports bar. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like I'd have a nervous breakdown in a sports bar. It's like people screaming loud music and watching television. Like that's just like, my brain is on fire in those moments. I'm like, how about we go to a hot yoga class and have a glass of wine after? And so like, there's so many other variables, right, that are coming into what will help us choose the best strategy for what we're feeling.
That's right. And so we've often talked about this in our lab as trying to triangulate on 3 factors. There's the person, the uniqueness, their traits, their personality, right? There's the strategies, and then there's the situation. And how do you find the fit between the person, the strategies, and the situation? Now, for folks who are watching who aren't didn't get 5 to 7 years or more of training in how to do meta analyses, looking at one factor is super complicated, right? It requires big data sets and lots of sophisticated statistical techniques in many ways. Going from 1 to 3, I got to be careful with my fingers, but 1 to 3, right? That triples, probably maybe even more, the complexity here. And that is why I think as a field we have not made as much progress as we'd like. But again, what we're talking about now, many other really smart, talented people are talking about doing right now. And so that's why when I look at these statistics, and I think about what's happening in the field, I get really excited because I think we are in a trajectory that is really positive.
Cool. I appreciate that. All right, we're going to go now. We're going to play around a little bit. So you talked a little bit about your dad and, his, way of teaching you these things. I'm going to ask you to take a moment and think about your emotional development. Just sit with that for a few seconds, from early childhood, elementary, middle, high school, beyond. And if I were to ask you to come up with a title to the movie that you would use to describe your emotional development at home, what might the title of the movie be?
Resilient.
Okay. And so say more about that.
I think I mean, like I think most human beings, I've been challenged emotionally throughout my life. I think we all are, and I think the challenges that we all face are impactful to us, despite what they might look like, to someone else. I think as a baseline, I've always been pretty good at managing emotions, but my parents got divorced when I was 12 years old during a time and in a cultural enclave where that wasn't very popular. I remember not wanting to, I didn't actually tell anyone that my parents were divorced for like 6 or 9 months. And then I ended up switching schools, which was this gift because then I could start fresh. And so, that was a challenge. Got to college and, was a valedictorian in high school, and I get to college and I come out my first semester and my GPA is below 3.0. It, didn't do well. And then, oh boy, did I make the right choice. And that, those curveballs just kept coming, right? Like health scares and kid stuff. Um, and I've been able to bounce back with those things from those kinds of challenges, which isn't to say that life has been free of all suffering. There has been suffering, but in each case, I've been able to overcome it. I've been resilient, and I've learned things from those experiences, which is not to say that new curveballs don't come, which challenge me. They do. But when I see a pitch that I've gotten already, I'm much better at to continue with metaphor, even though we probably shouldn't. I hit the ball. So I don't, I think I've gotten better at not making the same kinds of mistakes.
And relatedly, you talked about your dad. In my writing, I write about this thing that I call permission to feel. And, you talked about your dad. In my life, the person who I know gave me the permission to feel was my uncle Marvin, who was a teacher who came into my life at the right time and didn't say toughen up or get over it. He said, we're going to get through this together. And I've been asking now over 50,000 people, did you have permission to feel when you were a kid? Did you have someone, a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a teacher, a coach, someone who created the conditions for you to be your true, full feeling self? And so it sounds like it was your dad, but are there other people that you felt created those conditions for you?
I've always had permission to feel. The family that I grew up in and the culture that I grew up in was effusive, emotional. Not to say always, cupcake and tea and life, but I mean, but emotions were very prevalent. And so I was encouraged to talk about my feelings if I wanted to. My dad did that. My mom reinforced it. Um, my wife for the past 25 years has been that source. My in-laws, my kids, we talk about this stuff when it's relevant. So you know, it's been a mainstay in my life. Sometimes we use the expression that culture is the air we breathe. It's an invisible force that powerfully impacts us that we're not always aware of. And I think um, that kind of emotional resonance has been the air I've been breathing from a young age. It has always been there. And, if you come in our family now, it's like we talk about hugs and kisses and love, like it's what we do. That could be taken the wrong way, but you get
No,
the
no, no.
next
I
day.
think it's incredible. What's interesting to me, though, is that based on about the 50,000 people that I've surveyed about this,
Yeah.
you fit in the category of only about 30% of people. 70% of the people that I've surveyed across the United States, various demographics, basically say no, they didn't have someone,
Yeah.
that they could actually really confide in, or be their true selves with, or talk about like strong, unpleasant emotions with.
Well, there's another. There's a chapter in my book. I think it's called "The Power and Peril of Other People," and in some ways, I think it's just one of my favorite chapters because this issue that you are raising other people and the role they play in our emotional lives, I think that doesn't often get as much attention as it deserves. We often talk about emotion regulation as an individual enterprise. And if you look at actually the academic research on this, there are camps, right, that study strategies that we implement on our own. And then there's another camp that studies social support processes. They all go together. And we are a social species. We know that when people experience big emotions, cross-culturally, they are motivated to share them with other people. Now, culture can constrain that, right? It can discourage it or encourage it. But let's say you have found someone to talk to. How many people? Let's put all the people who have run through your fabulous program aside for a second. But like if you think about it, most people don't have emotional intelligence literacy programs that they're going through. Most people growing up have never actually learned what does science teach us about how to talk effectively to another human being. We've done research on this, and we find that a lot of people actually get it wrong. So really quick, good conversations about emotion have two parts, and they go in a specific order. Part one, you want to emotionally connect. You want to listen. You want to validate. You want to empathize with that person so they really feel heard. But you don't want to just do that. You don't want to just let the person vent about their emotions because then they leave the conversation. They feel close to you, but they're still upset. So you do all the emotional stuff, but then you transition into advisory mode. All right, let's work together to broaden your perspective, right? Like there's a formula for doing this, and it's easy to teach this formula, but does it get out there? And I think that is one of those low fruit opportunities that is out there for us.
All right, so we've got only a few minutes left, and I want to just get a few more questions in. These can be quick answers. Going back to go-to strategies. So here you are, someone who, in many ways, had a very fortunate childhood, and where you had the opportunity to learn about emotions, talk about emotions, have some role models. Are there any emotions now as an adult that you still struggle with?
Of course, I'm a human. Sometimes.
I know, but I want to know, like, where, when does the distancing not work?
Let me actually tell you how I think about it. So I can be challenged with anger at times, or anxiety, or sadness. Again, if we go back to that, when is emotion regulation needed? If the emotion's too loud or too long, that happens at times. And depending on the volume or duration, that for me correlates with the intensity of my intervention. And so let me break that down for you. Let's say it's a 60-mile-per-hour curveball. So something that kind of mildly perturbs me. distant self-talk. So Ethan, all right, here's how you're going to do this, and temporal distancing. How are you going to feel about this next week? That often takes the edge off the kind of mild stuff. Sometimes, if it's a little bit more strenuous, I might layer on a walk in a green space, which we know can be restorative cognitively, give people also like perspective broadening opportunities. I'll fold some exercise in too. Okay, that's not enough. I go deeper. Then I whip out my Rolodex. Maybe that's the wrong phrase to use also nowadays, less cultural relevance. I go into I got an amazing, I call them board of advisors. I have an amazing chatter board of advisors, people that are particularly adept at doing the two things we just talked about: emotionally resonating, validating, empathizing, listening, but then advising. So I've got like 3 or 4 people I can call whenever I want for personal stuff, 5 or 6 for professional, some overlap in those boards. That is, when the DEF CON level rises, I consult the board. And if things are, really getting out of hand, I actually will clean and organize, which for me is out of character, but I will do it.
But again, what you're getting at here is that theme, which is, I think, really important for people to know, is that dealing with feelings is not just one strategy. You're talking about taking breaths. You're talking about your distant self-talk. You're talking about reaching out to people, taking a walk, going into the closet and just like distracting yourself for a little while.
Music's another one. Totally underappreciated regulatory tool. We did an article on this recently. Sensory experiences, one of the most powerful ways of effortlessly shifting your emotion, right? Taste, touch, smell, sound. People know this, right? People know that that music changes the way we feel. There's a reason we go to concerts and play music at ball games and put it on in the car. But if you ask people, okay, well, what did you do the last time you were struggling with an emotional experience? And, did you use music to change your mood? Very, very low proportion, small proportion actually do it.
Although I think among adolescents, it's more popular.
I haven't ever compared the two, but even there is a study that I know of where it's a lot, the discrepancy between knowing that this helps and doing it is much larger than you would think for something that actually helps us. So, but just to punctuate what you said, Mark, if there's one thing I hope people take away from this conversation, it is that there are no one-size-fits-all solutions. That means no single strategies that work for all people in all situations, and no combinations of strategies that work for all people in all situations. There's a complexity to all this, and I think like working out provides a good analogy. If you think about it, there are myriad physical fitness routines out there, and a lot of my friends go exercise. They all do slightly different things, right? And depending on their goals, what they do may actually shift. If you want to build out your endurance, you do one thing, your strength, something else. Maybe it's interval training. Maybe it's CrossFit. Maybe it's hot yoga. We need to be thinking about managing our emotional lives and becoming emotionally fit, I think, in a similar way.
I really, really appreciate that perspective. And I, again, couldn't agree more. I think what makes it, and I think that's part of going back to the challenge of implementation, which is that because it's not like math, where 2 + 2 = 4, it's here's all these options, try them out, experiment with them, be a scientist about them and see if they work for you or not. If that one doesn't work, try it again maybe, or try it for a different feeling, or try this strategy. And I think that scares people oftentimes from teaching it because they're waiting for the right answer. And here's the way you do it. You just do this and everything's going to be great. But if it were only that easy. All right, we have to wrap. I understand that you have to go as well. One last question. Imagine a world where everyone has the ability to regulate their emotions. What will be different?
What wouldn't be different? So first of all, that world would not be a world of robots. It would be a world full of people experiencing emotions, but under their own terms to some degree, more under their own terms than we do right now. So they'd be in the driver's seat because we all have different goals for how to live what kinds of emotional lives we want to live. I think we'd still have enormous variability across people. But I do think there are some common goals out there that we would make some real progress in addressing. For example, there would be a lot fewer incidences of disease, physical disease, and mental disorder. So, we know there are connections between emotional dysregulation, cardiovascular disease, cancer, inflammation. All those should come down. We also, we don't have to spend too much time talking about depression, anxiety, and these other societal ills, things that cause massive suffering. Those should come down. We should also have more productive intergroup relationships. So many of the conflicts that exist, the geopolitical conflicts that exist, that have been with us for thousands of years, are emotionally infused conflicts. I think we would be benefiting there. I think we would have a much more skilled and efficient workforce. It's not easy to do your job when you're ruminating about something obsessively. It's not easy to write that chapter or focus on that presentation. So I think we'd have much, much better performance at work, on the sports field, at school. And I think we'd have much better relationships too, because we wouldn't be saying the things that we probably know we shouldn't say in the heat of the moment, and the negative repercussions that come from that. So the world will be a much better place. So thank you for asking me that question.
I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. So thank you again. I want to make sure that people know about you and have a place to go to learn about you. So can you just give us, whatever information would be helpful?
You can go to my website. It's my name, www.ethankross with a K, KROSS.com. And there's information about me, my book, and other things in that space. And you can also go to my lab website. If you just search University of Michigan Emotion and Self-Control Lab, you can read all our papers, see all the students and postdocs who really drive this research. And there'll be some links to some other relevant work there too.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Ethan Kross. My big take-home message was that introspection is our superpower, but it can also get in the way, and also that there are research-based strategies to help us be a little kinder to ourselves when we have to deal with difficult emotions. We talked about self-talk. What does that look like? We talked about using time and even spatial distance to help us deal with our feelings. Let me know below in the comments your thoughts about this episode. I'm particularly interested in hearing the ways that you've used distancing to deal with your difficult emotions. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I want to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, share this episode with your friends and family members, and also follow me on social media for additional tips. Really glad to have you on the Dealing with Feelings journey along with me. See you next time.